The moment Levi Callahan rode into Red Hollow's town square, everyone knew blood would spill, or worse, reputations would burn. The crowd had gathered like vultures, circling a young woman whose only crime was surviving. They demanded answers. They wanted a name. They craved her shame. But when the most dangerous man in 3 counties dismounted and said 4 words that shattered everything, "That child is mine," the entire town held its breath. This is the story of the woman they tried to destroy and the cowboy who refused to let them. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The October wind carried dust and judgment in equal measure through Red Hollow. Amelia Rowan had learned to walk with her head down. Not from shame, though the town had tried its damnedest to plant that poison in her heart, but from sheer survival. When you're a 22-year-old orphan with no family name to shield you and no husband to legitimize your existence, you learn that invisibility is armor, but some things can't be hidden forever. Her condition had been whispered about for weeks now. The swell of her belly beneath her worn calico dress had become the town's favorite topic, more entertaining than the drought, more scandalous than the banker's wife running off to San Francisco with a traveling preacher. "Did you see her at the Mercantile yesterday?" Martha Hensley had clucked to her sister outside the church, voice pitched just loud enough for Amelia to hear as she passed. "Bold as brass, that one, no shame whatsoever."
"Well, what do you expect?" her sister had replied, fanning herself with exaggerated propriety. "A girl like that, no parents to guide her, living alone in that shack by the creek. We all knew something like this would happen eventually." Amelia had kept walking, her basket of mending clutched tight against her ribs, each word landing like stones against her back. That had been 3 days ago. Today was worse. Today, Sheriff Boone had knocked on her door at dawn with a summons. The town council wanted to address the situation. They'd used formal language, words like community standards and moral obligation, but Amelia understood exactly what they meant. They wanted to make an example of her. Now she stood in the October cold outside the courthouse, surrounded by what seemed like half the town. Men she'd mended shirts for, women whose curtains she'd hemmed, children who'd waved to her just months ago, now hidden behind their mothers' skirts, as if poverty and pregnancy were contagious. Sheriff Boone stood on the courthouse steps, his considerable belly testing the buttons of his vest. Beside him, Mayor Thornton adjusted his spectacles with the air of a man about to pronounce sentence. "Miss Rowan," the mayor began, his voice carrying across the square. "This town was built on decent Christian values. Hard work, family, respectability." Amelia said nothing. She'd learned that silence was sometimes the only weapon left to the powerless. "Now, we understand that mistakes happen," he continued, and several women in the crowd made small noises of agreement. "Young people lacking proper guidance can fall prey to temptation. We're not entirely without mercy." "Get to the point, Thornton," someone shouted from the back. Amelia recognized the voice. Jack Peterson, who ran the livery stable and whose advances she'd rejected twice last spring. The mayor cleared his throat. "The point, Miss Rowan, is that this situation affects our entire community, our reputation. The moral fiber of Red Hollow depends on who's the father." The question came from Martha Hensley, cutting through the mayor's pontificating like a knife through butter. The crowd shifted, sensing blood in the water. "Yes," another voice called out. "Tell us who he is. Make him do right by you," old Mrs. Cooper added, though her tone suggested she doubted any man would claim responsibility. Amelia felt her throat tighten. This was the moment she'd been dreading, the question she couldn't answer, not because she didn't know, but because the truth was more complicated than these people could understand, more dangerous than they could imagine. She started, but her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Speak up," someone demanded. "The girl's got no answer because there's probably more than one possibility," Jack Peterson announced, to scattered laughter from some of the men. Amelia's hands clenched into fists. She wanted to scream at them all, wanted to tell them they knew nothing about her, about what had happened, about the winter that had changed everything. But fear, cold and rational, kept her silent. Because if she told them the truth, if she spoke his name, the consequences would ripple far beyond her own ruined reputation. "This is unseemly," Mayor Thornton was saying. "Miss Rowan,
Surely you understand that we cannot simply— The sound cut through his words like thunder through rain. Hoofbeats, slow, deliberate, heavy enough that Amelia felt them through the packed earth beneath her feet. The crowd began to turn, conversations faltering, as a single rider emerged from the dust haze at the end of Main Street. Even at a distance, Amelia recognized him. The set of his shoulders, the way he sat in the saddle like he'd been born there, the black hat pulled low against the October sun. Levi Callahan. The whispers started immediately, rippling through the crowd like wind through wheat. That's Callahan. What's he doing here? Someone must have sent for him. But Amelia knew no one had sent for him. Levi Callahan didn't come when summoned. He came when he decided to come, and not a moment sooner. He rode straight down the center of Main Street, the crowd parting instinctively before him. Men who'd been shouting questions moments ago suddenly found their boots fascinating. Women who'd been so bold with their judgment pressed back against storefronts. There was something about Levi Callahan that commanded space without demanding it. At 34, he owned more land than any 3 ranchers combined. His cattle operation stretched across territory that would take 2 days to ride across. He'd killed 3 men in self-defense, all verified by witnesses, all cleared by law, and the stories said he could track a whisper across stone. But it wasn't his wealth or his reputation with a gun that made people step aside. It was something else. Something in the way he moved through the world, like he'd already calculated every possible outcome and decided he could handle them all. He dismounted 20 feet from where Amelia stood, his boots hitting the dirt with solid authority. He didn't hurry, didn't rush, just walked toward her with that same unhurried confidence that had terrified and fascinated her in equal measure since the winter. The crowd was dead silent now. Levi stopped beside Amelia, close enough that she could smell leather and sage and the particular scent of the high country that clung to him always. He didn't look at her. Instead, his gaze swept across the assembled townspeople with the cold assessment of a man counting cards.
Quite a gathering, he said, his voice carrying easily despite its quietness. Someone getting married? Or is this a hanging? Hard to tell with this town sometimes. Sheriff Boone shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Callahan, this doesn't concern you. This is a town matter. Is it? Levi's attention fixed on the sheriff with the intensity of a rifle sight. Because from where I'm standing, looks like you've got half of Red Hollow surrounding one woman. In my experience, when men outnumber a woman 50 to 1, it's rarely about justice. Now see here, Mayor Thornton started. I hear there's talk about a child, Levi interrupted, still not raising his voice. Something about that calm delivery made it more threatening than any shout. Talk about fathers and responsibility and all manner of moral concerns. He let the words hang in the air for a moment. Then he turned, finally, to look at Amelia. Their eyes met, and in that instant, she saw everything. The question, the certainty, the decision he'd already made before riding into town. He was giving her a choice, a way out, a protection she'd never asked for but desperately needed. All she had to do was stay silent. Levi turned back to face the crowd, and when he spoke again, his words fell like an axe through timber. That child is mine. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. Someone gasped. Martha Hensley actually stumbled backward. Mayor Thornton's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. But Levi wasn't finished. He stepped slightly in front of Amelia, not dramatically, not like he was shielding her from bullets, but with the casual certainty of a man establishing a boundary that would not be crossed. Now, I understand there are some concerns about propriety and reputation, he continued, that dangerous calm never wavering. So let me address those right now. Miss Rowan and I have an understanding, a private matter that became complicated by circumstances. The child she's carrying is mine, and I take full responsibility for that fact. He let his gaze travel across the crowd again, making eye contact with specific people. Jack Peterson suddenly found something fascinating in the distance. Martha Hensley had gone pale. If anyone in this town has questions about Miss Rowan's character, Levi said softly, you can direct those questions to me. If anyone wants to discuss moral standards and community values, my door is always open. And if anyone, his voice dropped even lower, decides that gossip and judgment are more important than basic human decency, well, I'll remember that next time you come to me asking for credit at the bank I own, or employment at the ranches I operate, or help when the drought kills your cattle and you need water from my wells." The silence that followed was so complete that Amelia could hear the wind rattling a loose shutter 2 buildings away. "Mr. Callahan," Sheriff Boone finally managed, his face red, "I'm sure we all appreciate your clarification, but there are proper ways to handle these situations. The church, the community," Levi interrupted, "just spent the last 20 minutes surrounding a frightened young woman like a pack of wolves. Don't talk to me about proper ways, Sheriff. I've seen how this town handles its moral crusades." He turned to Amelia then, and his voice gentled by a fraction. "Miss Rowan, if you'll permit me, I'd like to take you home now." It wasn't really a question, but he waited for her answer anyway. Amelia managed a small nod, her throat too tight for words. Levi offered his arm with the courtly gesture of a man escorting a lady to a dance. Amelia took it, feeling the solid strength beneath the worn fabric of his shirt, and together they walked toward his horse. The crowd parted like water before them. Levi lifted her onto his horse with easy strength, then mounted behind her. His arm settled around her waist, protective, possessive, unmistakable in its meaning. "One more thing," he said, addressing the crowd one final time. "I'd better not hear about anyone bothering Miss Rowan. Not in town, not at her home, not anywhere. She's under my protection now. I trust that's clear enough?" No one answered, but the message had been received. Levi turned his horse and rode out of Red Hollow at the same unhurried pace he'd arrived. Amelia held secure against him, leaving behind a town square full of people whose certainties had just been shattered. They didn't speak during the ride. There was too much to say, and no safe way to say it yet. Amelia sat rigid in the saddle, her mind spinning, trying to process what had just happened. Levi Callahan, the most powerful, most untouchable man in 3 counties, had just claimed her child as his own, had put his reputation, his standing, his entire position in jeopardy for her. Why? The question burned in her chest, but she couldn't ask it. Not yet. Not while her emotions were still too raw, her fear still too close to the surface. They rode past the edge of town, past the cluster of small farms that marked Red Hollow's territory, out into the open country where the land rolled away in waves of brown grass and scattered oak. The October sun was warm on Amelia's face, but she couldn't stop shaking. "Easy," Levi murmured, his voice close to her ear. "You're safe now." But was she? Safe from the town's judgment, perhaps. Safe from being cast out completely, maybe. But safe from the consequences of what Levi had just done, from the questions that would follow, from the truth that neither of them had spoken. As they rode, Amelia's mind traveled back to the winter, to the storm, to the days that had led to this moment, the days that had started everything. She remembered the cold. That was what she remembered most vividly about that January, the bone-deep, brutal cold that had settled over the territory like a curse. Her wagon had broken down 15 miles outside Red Hollow, a wheel cracked beyond her ability to repair, and night had been falling fast. She'd tried to fix it herself, had struggled with the frozen wood and iron until her fingers were numb and bleeding. But some things can't be fixed through determination alone, and a broken wagon wheel in the middle of nowhere during a winter storm was one of them. She'd been preparing to huddle in the wagon bed, to wrap herself in every blanket she owned and pray she'd survive until morning when she'd heard the horse. At first she'd thought she was hallucinating, but then the rider had emerged from the swirling snow like something out of a ghost story. Dark coat, black hat, a presence that seemed too solid to be mere imagination. "You're going to freeze to death out here." His voice had cut through the wind, matter-of-fact and utterly certain. "My wagon," she'd started to explain, "will still be broken in the morning. Get on the horse." It hadn't been a request, and Amelia, already shaking so hard her teeth chattered, hadn't been in a position to argue. She'd let him pull her up onto his horse, had felt his arm lock around her waist, solid and warm even through layers of clothing. "There's a line shack about 2 miles north," he'd said. "We'll wait out the storm there." She should have been frightened. A young woman alone with a strange man, heading to an isolated cabin in the middle of a blizzard. Every cautionary tale she'd ever heard should have been screaming warnings. But something about the way he'd handled her, impersonal but careful,
like she was something valuable that needed protection, had quieted those fears. The line shack had been small, barely more than 4 walls and a roof, but it had a stove and firewood and blessed shelter from the wind. Levi had gotten a fire going while Amelia huddled in the corner trying to feel her fingers again. "You need to get out of those wet clothes," he'd said, turning his back to give her privacy. "There are blankets in the chest. Wrap up before hypothermia sets in." She'd done as he said, her frozen fingers fumbling with buttons and laces. When she was finally wrapped in a wool blanket, her wet dress spread by the fire to dry, he'd turned back around. That was when she'd gotten her first real look at Levi Callahan. She'd seen him before, of course. Everyone in Red Hollow knew who Levi Callahan was. But she'd never been this close, never had occasion to truly observe him. Now, in the firelight, she took in the details. The strong jaw shadowed with several days' worth of beard, the scar that cut through his left eyebrow, the eyes that were somewhere between gray and blue, assessing everything with quiet intelligence. He'd been younger than she'd expected. Not the grizzled old rancher she'd imagined, but a man probably in his early 30s, hard-worn by weather and work, but still in his prime. "What's your name?" he'd asked, settling against the opposite wall. "Amelia Rowan." He'd nodded, as if filing the information away. "Levi Callahan. I know who you are." A slight smile had touched his mouth. "Do you?" "Everyone knows who you are. Knowing who someone is and knowing them aren't the same thing." The storm had lasted 3 days. 3 days trapped in that tiny line shack while the wind howled and the snow piled higher than the windows. 3 days with nothing to do but talk, or sit in silence, or play cards with the deck Levi had produced from his saddlebag. They'd talked about everything and nothing, about the drought that had gripped the territory the previous summer, about the war that had ended when they were children, about books they'd read and places they'd never seen, and dreams that seemed too fragile to speak aloud, except in the strange intimacy of forced proximity. Levi had turned out to be different than his reputation suggested. He was quiet, yes, thoughtful and deliberate in his speech, but not cold. He'd listened when she talked, really listened, like her words mattered, and when he spoke it was with a dry humor that caught her off guard. "Why do you live alone?" he'd asked on the second day while they were playing cards. "My parents died when I was 16. Cholera outbreak. There was no one else." "No other family? No one who could have taken you in?" Amelia had shrugged. "My father had a brother in Missouri, but he had 8 children of his own and no interest in another mouth to feed. I learned to make do, mending clothes, and taking in washing and selling eggs from the 3 chickens I kept, whatever work I could find." She'd played a card, then looked up at him. "Why do you live alone?" "Who says I live alone?" "The entire territory. You're the mysterious bachelor rancher. Women gossip about you." That smile again. "Do they?" "They wonder why you've never married. And what do they conclude? That you're too particular, or too mean-tempered, or secretly in love with someone you can't have." She'd paused. "So which is it?" "None of the above. I just haven't found a good enough reason to change my circumstances." "Marriage requires a reason?" "Everything requires a reason. Or it should." On the 3rd morning, the storm had finally broken. Levi had saddled his horse and helped Amelia up behind him, and they'd ridden back toward Red Hollow through snow that came up to the horse's chest in places. But they'd stopped at her wagon first. Levi had examined the broken wheel with the practiced eye of someone who'd solved 1,000 such problems. "I'll send someone to fix it," he'd said. "Have it delivered to your place." "I can't pay for—" "I didn't ask you to pay." "Mr. Callahan." "Levi," he'd corrected. "After 3 days in close quarters, I think we're past formalities." He'd reached into his coat and pulled out a leather pouch. "This should cover the wheel repair and tide you over until you get back on your feet." Amelia had stared at the money, more than she'd make in 3 months of mending. "I can't accept this." "Yes, you can. It's not proper." "Proper." He'd said the word like it tasted bad. "You almost froze to death because of proper. Take the money, Amelia. Sometimes accepting help is the bravest thing you can do." But as he'd lifted her back onto his horse, he'd leaned close and said something that had puzzled her at the time. If this town ever turns on you, don't stand alone. She hadn't understood the warning then, hadn't seen why she'd need it. Now, riding away from Red Hollow with his arm around her waist and the entire town's shocked whispers still ringing in her ears, she finally understood. They arrived at her small house by the creek as the sun was starting to dip toward the horizon. Levi dismounted and helped her down, his hands careful on her waist. He didn't let go immediately. "We need to talk," he said quietly. Amelia nodded, her throat too tight for words. Inside, her house seemed smaller than usual, made cramped by his presence. Levi removed his hat and looked around, taking in the sparse furnishings, the neat poverty, the evidence of a life lived on the thinnest of margins. "Sit down," he said, pulling out one of her 2 chairs. "You've had a difficult day." Amelia sat, and Levi took the other chair, turning it around to straddle it with his arms crossed over the back. The position should have seemed casual, but everything about his bearing was alert. "I need you to understand something," he began.
"What I did today, what I said, it can't be taken back. Once words like that are spoken in public, they become truth whether they started that way or not." "I know," Amelia whispered. "Do you?" His eyes searched her face. "Because I need to know that you understand what this means, for both of us. You lied to protect me. I claimed a child as mine. In doing so, I've bound your reputation to mine. The town won't question it, they wouldn't dare, but they'll watch us. They'll expect certain things." "Marriage," Amelia said quietly. "Eventually, but not immediately. That would look suspicious, like we're scrambling to cover a mistake. We need to let the dust settle first." He leaned forward slightly. "In the meantime, I need to know the truth. All of it. Because if I'm going to protect you, I need to know what I'm protecting you from." Amelia's hands twisted in her lap. This was the moment she'd been dreading. The moment when she'd have to speak the truth aloud, give it shape and weight and consequence. "The child is yours," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Levi went very still. "What?" "The child. It's yours. You weren't lying in the town square. You were telling the truth." For a long moment, Levi said nothing. His face had gone carefully blank. That particular kind of blankness that meant a man was processing information that could change everything. "The storm," he finally said. "The third night." Amelia couldn't look at him. "You never asked. You never questioned. I thought maybe you knew, somehow. Or maybe you didn't remember." "I remember." The words were quiet, but certain. Amelia did look up then and found him watching her with an intensity that stole her breath. "I remember every moment of those 3 days," Levi continued. "Every word we spoke, every silence, every decision made in firelight." "Then you know it wasn't, Wasn't what? Your fault? Your responsibility?" He shook his head. "It was both of ours. We made a choice. Maybe not a wise one. Maybe not one we'd have made under different circumstances. But we made it together." "I should have told you," Amelia said, tears pricking her eyes. "When I realized, but I didn't know how to find you, didn't know if you'd even want to know." "Stop." Levi held up a hand. "You don't get to carry that alone. I'm the one who rode away and didn't look back. I'm the one who convinced himself it was a moment out of time, something that couldn't touch the real world." His jaw tightened. "I was a coward. You were protecting yourself. From what? From connection? From responsibility? From caring about someone?" He stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "I told myself I was being practical. That we'd both known what that night was and what it wasn't. That you deserved better than a man like me anyway. A man like you. A man who's killed people, Amelia. A man who's made enemies. A man who's built everything he has on being alone because it's safer that way. Safer for me and safer for anyone foolish enough to get close. But you came today," Amelia said softly. "When I needed you most, you came." Levi turned back to face her. "I heard the talk. 3 days ago, in town, men laughing outside the saloon about the orphan girl who'd gotten herself in trouble. I didn't know it was you at first. Then someone said your name, and—" He stopped, his hands clenching into fists. "I knew," he finished quietly.
Before I did the math, before I let myself think it through, I knew. And I knew what this town would do to you if someone didn't step in. So you lied. No. He moved back to stand in front of her. I told the truth. Maybe not the whole truth, maybe not in the way they understood it, but I didn't lie. That child is mine. And if you'll permit it, I'd like to be part of raising them. Amelia felt tears spill over.
You don't have to,
I want to. He crouched down so they were eye level. I'm not proposing out of obligation or duty or whatever noble sacrifice you're imagining. I'm proposing because in 3 days during a snowstorm, I got to know you better than I've known most people in years, and I've thought about you every day since. And now, he reached out tentatively, his hand hovering near her belly before settling there with gentle certainty. Now we're going to have a child together, and that matters. You matter. I don't know how to be married, Amelia whispered. Neither do I. But we learned to survive a blizzard together. We can probably figure this out too. It wasn't a romantic proposal. There was no kneeling, no ring, no pretty speeches. Just two people who'd stumbled into something real and were trying to figure out how to honor it. Okay, Amelia said. Okay? Yes, I'll marry you, when you think the time is right. Levi's hand tightened slightly on her belly, and something that might have been relief crossed his face. Before winter, I don't want the baby born before we're married. That only gives us about 6 weeks. Then we'd better start planning. He stood, offering his hand to help her up. In the meantime, I'm taking you to the ranch. You can't stay here alone, not with the whole town watching. It's not proper for us to live together yet, but I've got a foreman's cottage that's empty. You'll have privacy and protection. I have work here. People depend on me for mending. They'll find someone else. Or they'll bring the work to you. Either way, you're not staying in this house by yourself. There was no room for argument in his tone, and truthfully, Amelia didn't want to argue. The thought of spending another night alone, wondering if someone from town would come to her door with more questions or accusations, made her stomach turn. I'll need to pack, she said. I'll help. They worked in silence, Amelia gathering her few possessions while Levi loaded them onto his horse with efficient care. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, they left Amelia's little house behind. The ride to Levi's ranch took them deeper into open country, away from Red Hollow and its poisonous gossip. The land here was wilder, more beautiful, rolling hills dotted with oak trees, meadows that would be green in spring, distant mountains purple against the darkening sky. The main ranch house came into view as full dark settled, a sprawling structure of timber and stone that spoke of prosperity built through hard work and harder choices. Lamps glowed in windows. Smoke rose from chimneys. It looked, Amelia thought, like a home. But Levi didn't take her to the main house. Instead, he rode to a smaller building set about 100 yards away, a cottage that, while modest, was larger and better built than the house she'd left behind. The foreman used to live here before he got married and built his own place, Levi explained, helping her dismount. It's been empty for about a year, but it's clean and sound. You'll have everything you need. He opened the door and lit a lamp, revealing a cozy interior. A pot-bellied stove, a real bed with a quilt, a table and chairs, shelves and cupboards, more space than Amelia had ever had to herself. I'll bring your things in, Levi said. There's firewood by the stove and supplies in the cupboard. If you need anything, the main house is... Levi. He stopped, turned back to face her. Thank you, Amelia said simply, for everything. For today, for this, for... Her voice caught. For not running away. Something softened in his expression. He crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her into an embrace that was both gentle and fierce. Amelia buried her face against his chest and finally let herself cry. Great shaking sobs that she'd been holding back since the moment the town had surrounded her. Levi held her through it all, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other spread protectively across her back. You're safe now, he murmured into her hair. I promise you, Amelia, you're safe. And for the first time in months, maybe for the first time since her parents died, Amelia believed it. The first week at the ranch passed in a blur of adjustment and careful distance. Amelia woke each morning to the sound of cattle lowing in distant pastures and the rhythmic strike of hammers from the barn where Levi's men were repairing winter damage. The cottage felt both foreign and welcoming, too much space for someone accustomed to living small, but filled with a quiet comfort she hadn't known in years. Levi kept his word about giving her privacy. He came by each morning after breakfast, always knocking first, always waiting for permission to enter. Sometimes he brought food, fresh bread still warm from the ranch kitchen, eggs, preserves. Other times he came just to check on her, his questions simple and direct. Did you sleep well? Is the stove working properly? Do you need anything? They were careful conversations, formal almost, as if they were both trying to navigate new territory without a map. The intimacy of that night during the storm seemed like something from another lifetime, buried beneath layers of propriety and uncertainty. But on the 8th day, everything shifted. Amelia woke before dawn to sharp pains that stole her breath. At first she thought it was just the baby moving. The child had been active lately, pressing against her ribs with what felt like tiny fists. But these pains were different, deeper, more insistent. She tried to breathe through them, tried to convince herself it was nothing. She was only about 6 months along, too early for labor, far too early. But the pains intensified, coming in waves that left her gasping. She managed to pull on her robe and stumble to the door just as the eastern sky was beginning to lighten. The main house was dark, except for a single lamp in what she'd learned was Levi's study. He kept early hours, up before the hands to plan the day's work. The walk to the main house felt like miles. Amelia had to stop twice, clutching the porch railing of the cottage as contraction seized her body. Fear clawed at her throat. This was wrong. This was all wrong. She made it to the main house and pounded on the door with trembling fists. Levi answered within seconds, already dressed for the day, a cup of coffee in his hand. His eyes went wide when he saw her. Amelia, something's wrong, she managed. The baby. I think something's wrong. He set down his coffee and caught her as her knees buckled, another contraction tearing through her. How long has this been happening? About an hour, maybe longer. Tears streamed down her face. It's too early. It's too early for this. Levi's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. We need to get you lying down. Can you walk? She nodded, though she wasn't sure it was true. He half carried her back to the cottage, his arms solid around her waist. Once inside, he helped her onto the bed and pulled up a chair beside her. I'm going to send someone for the doctor, he said, but the nearest doctor is in Millbrook, which is 4 hours away even if we ride hard. So in the meantime, I need you to tell me exactly what you're feeling. Pain. Cramping. Like my body is trying to... She couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't voice the terror that the baby was coming months too soon. Okay. Levi's hand found hers, his grip strong and steady. Okay. Listen to me. I've delivered more calves and foals than I can count. The principles are the same. Bodies know what they're doing, even when it feels like everything's chaos. I'm not a horse, Amelia said through gritted teeth. No, but you're just as strong, stronger probably. He stood quickly. I'm going to wake Marcus and send him for the doctor. Don't move. I'll be back in 2 minutes. He was true to his word, returning before Amelia had finished counting her breaths through the next contraction. Marcus is riding out now, Levi said, pulling the chair close again. He'll make good time, but we need to be prepared for the possibility that the baby comes before the doctor arrives. It can't. It's too early. The baby won't survive. Stop. His voice was firm, but not unkind. You don't know that. I've seen foals born a month early who grew up to be the strongest horses in the string. Life finds a way, Amelia, even when the timing's not perfect. Another contraction hit, and Amelia squeezed his hand hard enough that she felt his bones shift. He didn't flinch. That's it, he murmured. Breathe through it. You're doing fine. This is your fault, she gasped when the pain receded. I know. If we hadn't, I know. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. And I'll carry that guilt. But right now, I need you to focus on staying calm. Panic won't help you or the baby. The hours that followed blurred together in a haze of pain and fear. Levi never left her side. When the contractions came too fast for her to catch her breath between them, he talked to her, low, steady stories about the ranch, about horses he'd trained, about anything and everything that might distract her from the agony. There was this Mustang stallion, he said during one particularly brutal contraction. Caught him up in the high country about 5 years ago. Meanest son of a gun I'd ever seen. Took me 3 months just to get close enough to touch him without getting my head kicked in. Why are you telling me this? Amelia panted. Because you remind me of him. Stubborn, determined to survive on your own terms, and absolutely magnificent when you stop fighting long enough to trust someone. Despite the pain, despite everything, Amelia almost smiled. By mid-morning, it was clear the baby was coming whether they were ready or not. Levi sent one of the hands to fetch Rosa, the ranch cook who'd helped birth half the children in the county. Rosa arrived like a force of nature, a stout Mexican woman in her 50s with capable hands and no patience for nonsense. Out, she ordered Levi the moment she saw him sitting beside the bed. I'm staying. This is no place for men. It's my child. I'm staying. Rosa looked at him for a long moment, then shrugged. Your choice. But if you faint, I'm leaving you on the floor. Fair enough? What followed was the most terrifying and transcendent experience of Amelia's life. The pain reached levels she hadn't known were possible. She screamed, she cursed, she begged for it to stop. And through it all, Levi stayed. He held her hand, he let her dig her nails into his palm until she drew blood. He wiped sweat from her forehead and whispered encouragement that she barely heard over the roaring in her ears. I can see the head, Rosa announced. One more push, mija. One more and you meet your baby. Amelia gathered every ounce of strength she had left and pushed. The baby entered the world with a cry that was far too small, far too fragile. Rosa worked quickly, cutting the cord and wrapping the infant in clean cloths. The silence that followed was deafening. Is it? Amelia couldn't finish the question. Rosa turned, and in her arms was the tiniest baby Amelia had ever seen. A boy, red-faced and furious, his cry gaining strength with each breath. He's small, Rosa said carefully. Very small. But he's breathing on his own. That's a good sign. She placed the baby on Amelia's chest, and the world narrowed to that single moment. This impossibly tiny human, this miracle, this consequence of a choice made in firelight during a storm. Hello? Amelia whispered, tears streaming down her face. Hello, little one. She looked up at Levi and found his face transformed. The hard edges had softened. His eyes were bright with unshed tears. He reached out tentatively, his work-roughened fingers stroking the baby's impossibly small hand. The baby's fingers curled around Levi's finger, gripping with surprising strength. And Levi Callahan, the man who'd faced down gunfighters, who'd built an empire through sheer determination, who'd killed to defend what was his, broke. Tears spilled down his cheeks unchecked. His shoulders shook. He pressed his free hand over his mouth, but it couldn't contain the sob that escaped. I'm sorry, he managed. It's okay, Amelia said softly. He's beautiful, isn't he? Levi could only nod, unable to speak past the emotion choking his throat. Rosa cleared her throat. The doctor will need to examine him when he arrives. Babies born this early, they face challenges. But for now, skin to skin is best. Keeps him warm. The doctor arrived 2 hours later, by which time the baby had nursed briefly and fallen asleep against Amelia's chest. Dr. Morrison was a thin man in his 60s with gentle hands and worried eyes. His examination was thorough and silent. Amelia watched his face, trying to read his expression, her heart in her throat. Finally, he straightened and removed his spectacles to clean them, a gesture Amelia would learn meant he was organizing his thoughts. He's small, the doctor said. About 4 pounds, I'd estimate. That's concerning. But his lungs sound clear, his color is good, and his reflexes are strong. Those are all positive signs. Will he survive? Levi's voice was rough, scraped raw. I can't promise anything. The next few days will be critical. Keep him warm, keep him fed, watch for any signs of distress. If he makes it through the week, his chances improve significantly. Dr. Morrison looked between them. He's a fighter, this one. Takes after his parents, I'd wager. After the doctor left, promising to return in 2 days to check on them, Amelia and Levi were left alone with their son. The cottage felt different now, sanctified somehow by the presence of new life. What should we name him? Amelia asked quietly. Levi had been standing by the window staring out at nothing. He turned at her question. I don't know. I hadn't thought that far ahead. Daniel, Amelia said.
It was my father's name. Daniel Callahan. Levi tested the name, then nodded. It suits him. He moved to sit on the edge of the bed, careful not to jostle mother or child. His hand came to rest on Amelia's shoulder. I meant what I said in town, he said quietly, about taking responsibility, about protecting you both. But I need you to know it's more than that. Levi, let me finish. He took a breath. When I rode into Red Hollow and saw them surrounding you, I felt something I haven't felt in years. Fear. Real, gut-deep fear. Not for myself. I stopped being afraid for myself a long time ago. But for you. His hand moved from her shoulder to gently touch their son's head, his palm nearly covering the baby's entire skull. And now this boy who shouldn't exist but does, who's fighting to survive against odds that would break a grown man. His voice cracked. I don't know how to be a father, Amelia. I don't know how to be a husband, but I know I want to try. We'll figure it out together, Amelia said, covering his hand with hers. They sat like that as the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, three people who'd become a family through circumstance and choice in equal measure. The first 3 days were the hardest. Daniel struggled to nurse, his mouth too small, his strength too limited. Amelia barely slept, waking every hour to feed him, to check his breathing, to reassure herself he was still alive. Levi moved into the cottage despite propriety's protests. He set up a cot in the corner and took the night watches, sitting beside the bed with their son cradled in his arms, vigilant against threats both seen and unseen. On the fourth morning, Amelia woke to find Levi standing by the window, Daniel against his bare chest. He was humming something low and tuneless, swaying slightly. Is he okay? She asked, her heart immediately racing. He's fine. Better than fine. He took a full feeding an hour ago and kept it down. His color's better. Feel his grip. Levi brought the baby to her, and Amelia marveled at the strength in those tiny fingers when they wrapped around hers. He's going to make it, Levi said with quiet certainty. I can feel it. By the end of the week, Dr. Morrison confirmed what they'd begun to hope. Daniel was gaining weight, his breathing was strong, and while he'd need careful monitoring for months, the immediate danger had passed. Remarkable, the doctor said, shaking his head. I've seen bigger, stronger babies fail to thrive. This one has a will to live. After the doctor left, Levi found Amelia in the rocking chair he'd brought from the main house, Daniel sleeping in her arms. We need to set a date, he said without preamble. A date? For the wedding. We can't wait until the original timeline. Daniel's here now, and people will talk. I want him to have my name legally. I want you to have my name. When? 2 weeks. That gives us time to arrange things, but doesn't delay long enough to raise more questions. Amelia looked down at their son, then back at Levi. That's fast. Is it too fast? She thought about it. About the man who'd claimed her child in front of the entire town, who'd sat beside her through hours of labor without flinching, who'd cried when their son was born and hadn't been ashamed of his tears, who stood watch through the darkest hours to make sure they both survived. No, she said finally. It's not too fast. The wedding was arranged for a Thursday in late November in the small church at the edge of Levi's property. Reverend Patterson agreed to perform the ceremony with only minimal questions that Levi deflected with his usual calm authority. The guest list was small. Some of the ranch hands, Rosa, Dr. Morrison, and a handful of business associates Levi felt obligated to invite. Notably absent were most of Red Hollow's prominent citizens, though whether they weren't invited or declined to attend remained unclear. Amelia spent the days leading up to the wedding in a strange state of anticipation and anxiety. She'd never imagined her wedding would be like this, hurried, practical, born of necessity rather than romance. But then again, she'd never imagined much of her life would turn out the way it had. Rosa helped her sew a dress from fabric Levi had brought from Millbrook, a soft blue wool that suited the late autumn weather. It wasn't white, wasn't traditional, but it made Amelia feel almost beautiful when she looked in the mirror. Daniel, now 3 weeks old and thriving against all odds, would be present for the ceremony. Rosa had fashioned him a small white gown, and Amelia couldn't help but smile at the absurdity of it all. A shotgun wedding with the evidence of their transgression right there for everyone to see. But Levi didn't seem concerned with appearances. The night before the wedding, he came to the cottage after dinner. Amelia had just finished nursing Daniel and was settling him in the wooden cradle Levi had built with his own hands. "Can we talk?" Levi asked from the doorway. Of course. He came inside and sat at the table, and Amelia joined him, leaving the lamp low so as not to wake the baby. "I've been thinking about what comes after tomorrow," Levi began. "About what kind of marriage this will be." Amelia's stomach tightened.
What do you mean? I mean that we're entering this arrangement for practical reasons, to protect you and Daniel, to silence the gossip, to give our son legitimacy. He met her eyes directly. But I don't want you to feel trapped. I don't want you to feel like you owe me anything beyond what we've agreed to. I don't understand. I'm saying that this marriage can be whatever we make it. If you want separate rooms, separate lives beyond what's necessary for appearances, I'll respect that. If you want, Levi. Amelia reached across the table to still his restless hands. Do you remember what you said when Daniel was born about wanting to try? Yes. I want to try too. Not because I feel obligated. Not because I'm grateful, though I am, but because during that storm, I saw something in you that I've never seen in anyone else. And these past weeks, watching you with our son, that feeling has only grown stronger. She took a breath, gathering courage. I know this isn't a normal courtship. I know we're doing everything backward, but maybe that's okay. Maybe we can build something real out of all this chaos. Levi's expression softened. You're sure? I'm terrified, Amelia admitted. But yes, I'm sure. He stood and moved around the table, pulling her up into an embrace that felt like coming home. When he kissed her, it was gentle and asking, nothing like the desperate passion of that night in the line shack. This was a promise, a beginning. Tomorrow, he murmured against her hair, tomorrow you'll be my wife. Tomorrow, she agreed, and felt something that might have been hope bloom in her chest. The wedding itself was simple and surprisingly moving. Reverend Patterson spoke about partnership and faith, about building a life together through trials and triumphs. Amelia held Daniel in her arms while Levi stood beside her, straight-backed and solemn, his hand warm in hers. When it came time for the vows, Levi's voice was steady and clear. I, Levi Callahan, take you, Amelia Rowan, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to protect you, to provide for you, and to honor you all the days of my life. Amelia's voice shook slightly as she repeated her own vows, but she meant every word. I, Amelia Rowan, take you, Levi Callahan, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to stand beside you, to build a home with you, and to love you all the days of my life. The kiss that sealed their marriage was chaste, appropriate for the setting, but Amelia felt its significance down to her bones. They were married. She was Amelia Callahan now, wife, mother, part of something larger than her solitary survival. The celebration afterward was modest, a meal prepared by Rosa, toasts from the ranch hands, gentle congratulations from Dr. Morrison. No one mentioned the circumstances that had led to this moment. No one questioned the timeline. Levi's presence and position made such questions unthinkable. As evening fell and the guests departed, Levi and Amelia found themselves alone in the main house for the first time. They'd agreed she would move in after the wedding, that the cottage would revert to its intended use as guest quarters. Levi led her upstairs to a bedroom she'd never seen, large and comfortable, with a fire already crackling in the hearth. Daniel's cradle had been moved there earlier, positioned near the bed where Amelia could reach him easily during the night. I had them prepare the room next door as well, Levi said quietly. If you want your own space, no. Amelia turned to face him. Unless you want, no. His hands came up to frame her face. I want you here, with me, if that's what you want too. It is. They came together slowly this time, without the urgency of that first night, without the desperate need that had driven them then. This was different. This was choice. This was two people deciding, consciously and deliberately, to build something together. Later, as Amelia lay in Levi's arms, listening to their son's quiet breathing from the cradle nearby, she thought about how strange life was. How a broken wagon and a winter storm had led to this moment. How shame and fear had transformed into hope and family. "What are you thinking?" Levi asked softly, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her shoulder. "That I never imagined my life would look like this." "Is that good or bad?" "Good," she said without hesitation. "Terrifying, but good." "I'll take terrifying but good over boring and safe any day." Amelia smiled against his chest. "Says the man who built his entire life on being safe." "Alone," he corrected. "I built my life on being alone. That's different than safe. Alone just means you have less to lose, but it also means you have less to live for." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "You and Daniel, you've given me something to live for. Something worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth changing for." "You don't have to change," Amelia said. "Maybe not, but I want to try. I want to be the kind of man who deserves you, the kind of father Daniel can be proud of." "You already are." They fell silent then, wrapped in each other and in the quiet certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The town might whisper, the future might be uncertain, but here, in this room, with their son sleeping peacefully nearby, they had everything that mattered. A week after the wedding, Levi had to ride to Millbrook for business. He'd been reluctant to leave, worried about Amelia and Daniel, but she'd insisted she'd be fine. "I have Rosa here," she'd reminded him, "and Marcus and the other hands are just across the yard. We'll be safe for 2 days." Still, Levi had extracted promises that she'd send for him immediately if anything went wrong, that she'd rest when the baby slept, that she wouldn't overexert herself. "I'm not made of glass," Amelia had teased. "I survived childbirth. I think I can handle 2 days alone." But she'd been wrong. The trouble came from an unexpected direction. On the second day of Levi's absence, a rider appeared at the ranch, a well-dressed man on an expensive horse, claiming to be conducting a survey for the territorial government. Rosa had been in town buying supplies. The ranch hands were out checking fence lines. Amelia was alone in the house with Daniel when the man knocked. She answered the door with the baby in her arms, immediately uneasy. Something about the man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Callahan?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Yes, can I help you?" "James Hartley. I'm with the Territorial Land Office. I have some questions about your husband's property claims." It sounded official enough, but every instinct Amelia had was screaming danger. "My husband isn't here. You'll have to come back when he returns." "Actually, I have questions for you specifically about the circumstances of your marriage. There have been concerns raised about the legitimacy of certain claims." Amelia's blood ran cold. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" Hartley's smile widened. "A hasty wedding, a premature child. Questions about whether this marriage was entered into honestly or whether it was a scheme to—" He didn't get to finish. A rifle cocked behind him, and Marcus's voice cut through the afternoon air like a whip. "I'd suggest you get back on your horse and ride out, mister, before I decide you're trespassing." Hartley turned slowly, hands raised. "I'm with the territorial government. I don't care if you're with the president himself. This is private property, and Mrs. Callahan asked you to leave. So leave." After a tense moment, Hartley mounted his horse, but before he rode away, he looked back at Amelia with cold calculation. "This isn't over. Questions have been raised. They'll need to be answered." When Levi returned that evening and heard what had happened, his fury was quiet and all the more terrifying for it. "Hartley," he said, his voice like ice. "He works for the syndicate." "What syndicate?" "A group of investors from back east who've been trying to buy up land in this territory. I've refused to sell, so now they're looking for ways to force my hand. Questioning the legitimacy of our marriage is their way of challenging my property claims." "Can they do that?" Levi's jaw tightened. "They can try. And if they find the right judge, the right leverage, they might succeed. A marriage entered into fraudulently can be annulled. And if our marriage is annulled, Daniel's legitimacy comes into question. And if that happens—" He didn't finish, but Amelia understood. Everything they'd built, everything they were trying to protect, could be torn apart by legal maneuvering and greed. "What do we do?" she asked. Levi looked at her, then at Daniel sleeping in her arms. Something hardened in his expression. "We fight," he said simply. "We prove this marriage is real. We show them there's nothing fraudulent about it, and we make sure they know that attacking my family is the worst mistake they could possibly make." The fight Levi promised came faster than either of them expected. Within 3 days of Hartley's visit, official papers arrived via courier, a legal challenge to the Callahan land claims filed with the territorial court. The language was dense and deliberately confusing, but the intent was clear enough. The syndicate was arguing that Levi's recent marriage constituted a fraudulent attempt to consolidate holdings through false pretenses, and therefore all property transfers and claims made in conjunction with said marriage should be voided. Levi read the documents twice in silence, his expression growing darker with each page. Then he set them on his desk and looked up at Amelia, who'd been standing by the window with Daniel sleeping against her shoulder. "They're questioning whether our marriage was legitimate," he said flatly, claiming it was a business arrangement disguised as matrimony to bypass territorial regulations about land consolidation. "That's insane. We didn't marry for land." "No, but we married quickly, under circumstances that raise questions. A woman with no family, no resources, suddenly wed to the wealthiest rancher in 3 counties, right after he publicly claimed her illegitimate child. To outsiders, it could look like a convenient arrangement." Amelia felt cold spread through her chest. "So what do? We prove them wrong. We prove this marriage is real in every way that matters." Levi stood and moved to her, his hand gentle on her cheek. "But I need you to understand what that means. They're going to dig into our past. They're going to ask invasive questions. They're going to try to find any crack in our story they can exploit. Let them dig. We have nothing to hide." "Don't we?" His eyes searched hers. "We married because you were pregnant with my child, yes. But we also married because it was practical, because it protected you from scandal and gave Daniel a name. Those are true things, Amelia." "And if they twist those truths the right way, then we tell bigger truths," Amelia interrupted. "We tell them that, yes, we married quickly, but that doesn't make it any less real. We tell them that you claimed our child because you wanted to, not because you had to. We tell them—" She stopped, her throat tightening with emotion. "We tell them that I love you," she finished quietly. "That this marriage might have started from necessity, but it's grown into something real, something worth fighting for." Levi's expression softened, and he pulled her close, careful not to crush Daniel between them. "I love you too," he murmured into her hair. "I should have said it before now. Should have told you every day since the wedding. But I'm saying it now. I love you, Amelia Callahan, and I'll be damned if I let anyone take you or our son away from me." The legal battle that followed consumed the next several weeks. Levi hired a lawyer from Denver, a sharp-tongued woman named Catherine Mills, who had a reputation for eviscerating opposing counsel in court. She arrived at the ranch like a winter storm, all business and barely contained fury at what she called legal harassment disguised as land acquisition. "They have no case," she announced after reviewing the documents. "Marriage fraud requires proof of intent to deceive. Unless they can prove you and Mrs. Callahan conspired to marry solely for legal or financial gain, with no intention of actually fulfilling the obligations of marriage, they have nothing." "Can they prove that?" Amelia asked. Catherine's eyes were sharp. "Can they? That depends entirely on how you two conduct yourselves, how you've been conducting yourselves. A marriage in name only, with separate residences and no genuine partnership, could be argued as fraudulent. But a real marriage, with shared lives and genuine affection, that's unassailable." "We share a home," Levi said. We share a bed. We're raising our son together. What more do they need?" "Witnesses. People who can testify to the genuine nature of your relationship. Not just that you cohabitate, but that you act like a married couple. That there's real affection, real partnership." She looked between them. "I'll be frank. The fact that you married hastily after a pregnancy will work against you. The opposing counsel will paint Mrs. Callahan as an opportunist and you as a fool taken in by feminine wiles. We need to counter that narrative with something stronger." "The truth," Amelia said. "The truth is good," Catherine agreed, "but we need the right people to tell it. Your ranch hands, your business associates, people from town who've seen you together since the marriage. We need testimony that this is a genuine union, not a legal convenience. Over the following days, Catherine interviewed everyone she could find. Rosa spoke passionately about how Levi had stayed by Amelia's side through Daniel's difficult birth, how he'd cried when his son was born, how he doted on both mother and child with obvious devotion. Dr. Morrison testified to the medical facts of Daniel's premature birth and Levi's constant presence during those critical first days. Marcus and the other ranch hands described the changes they'd seen in their boss, how he'd softened, how he smiled more, how he rushed home each evening instead of working until dark. But Catherine warned them it might not be enough. The syndicate has resources, she said grimly. They'll find their own witnesses, people willing to testify to anything for the right price. And juries in territorial courts can be unpredictable. We need something more, something undeniable. The solution came from an unexpected source. Sheriff Boone appeared at the ranch one cold December morning, looking uncomfortable and vaguely ashamed. Levi met him on the porch, his posture wary. "Sheriff, what brings you out here?" "Need to talk to you, Callahan, and Mrs. Callahan, if she's available." Amelia emerged with Daniel bundled against the cold, curiosity overcoming caution. The sheriff removed his hat and nodded to her. "Ma'am, I wanted to apologize for what happened in town, the way folks treated you, the way I let them treat you." "That's in the past," Amelia said carefully. "Maybe, but it's relevant to the present." Boone shifted his weight. "I've been hearing things about this legal challenge, about what the syndicate's trying to claim, and I wanted you both to know that if it comes to testimony, I'll speak on your behalf." Levi's eyebrows rose. "Will you now?" "I was there that day in the town square. I saw how Callahan looked at you, ma'am, how he stood in front of you like he'd take on the whole town to protect you. That wasn't an act. That wasn't a man playing a part for legal advantage. That was a man defending what was his because he cared about it." The sheriff's face reddened slightly. "I've known Callahan for 15 years. Never once seen him show that kind of emotion in public. Hell, never seen him show that kind of emotion at all. A man doesn't risk his reputation and his standing for a business arrangement. He does it for something real." Levi was quiet for a moment, then extended his hand. "Thank you, Sheriff. That means more than you know." After Boone left, Amelia turned to Levi with questions in her eyes. "You and the sheriff have history? He was the one who cleared me in the shooting 10 years ago, the one that—" Levi paused. "The one that made people afraid of me. Boone could have ruled it murder, but he investigated thoroughly and determined it was self-defense. He didn't have to do that. It would have been easier to lock me up and let the courts sort it out. But he did the work to find the truth. And now he's returning the favor. Maybe, or maybe he genuinely believes what he said." Levi pulled her close. "Either way, it helps our case." But the syndicate wasn't finished. 2 weeks before the scheduled hearing, new allegations emerged. Someone had given testimony claiming to have seen Amelia in Red Hollow months before the storm, speaking intimately with multiple men. The implication was clear. They were trying to suggest Daniel's parentage was uncertain, that Levi had been tricked into claiming a child that might not be his. Amelia was devastated when Catherine showed her the deposition. "It's a lie," she said, her voice shaking. "I barely spoke to anyone in town. I kept to myself, did my work, and went home. I know," Catherine said gently, "and we'll prove it's a lie. But we need to be prepared for the fact that they're going to try every dirty trick they can think of. They're desperate, which makes them dangerous." That night, Amelia couldn't sleep. She lay awake in the darkness, Daniel sleeping peacefully in his cradle, Levi's steady breathing beside her, a reminder that she wasn't alone. But the weight of the allegations pressed down on her chest like a physical thing. "Tell me what you're thinking," Levi said quietly, and she realized he was awake too. "That maybe this is all my fault. That if you'd never stopped to help me that night during the storm, none of this would be happening. You'd still have your uncomplicated life, and I'd—" "Be dead," Levi interrupted. "You'd be dead, frozen in that wagon. And our son wouldn't exist. And I'd still be living half a life, alone and telling myself it was enough." He rolled to face her, his hand finding hers in the darkness. "I don't regret stopping that night. I don't regret any of it. Not the storm, not the consequences, not the fight we're in now. Because all of it led to this. To you. To Daniel. To having something worth fighting for. Even if we lose, we won't lose. His voice was absolute certainty. I've built everything I have through persistence and careful planning. I'm not about to let a group of Eastern investors take it away because they think I'm an easy target. What are you planning? Something they won't expect. Something that'll make it very clear that this marriage is real, and they've made a serious mistake in challenging it. He wouldn't say more that night, but Amelia could feel the tension in him, the coiled energy of a man planning his next move. The answer came 3 days later when Levi announced they were hosting a Christmas gathering at the ranch. A party? Amelia asked, confused. A celebration. We'll invite everyone, business associates, neighboring ranchers, people from town. We'll show them what our life looks like. Let them see us as a family. Let them witness firsthand that this marriage is everything it should be. Catherine, when informed of the plan, actually smiled. It's brilliant. Put your life on display. Show people the reality of your relationship. It'll be much harder for the syndicate to claim fraud when dozens of witnesses can testify to seeing you together, acting as a genuine married couple. It's also a risk, Levi acknowledged. If something goes wrong, if we seem awkward or forced, it could hurt our case. Then we don't seem awkward or forced, Amelia said, feeling a flutter of nervousness. We just act natural. We be ourselves. Can you handle that? Having all those people here, watching us? Amelia thought about the girl she'd been, afraid, isolated, desperate for invisibility. Then she looked at Daniel, sleeping peacefully nearby, and felt something harden in her chest. They've already judged me, she said quietly. They've already whispered about me and made assumptions about my character. This is our chance to show them the truth. I can handle it. The preparations for the party consumed the next week. Rosa recruited help from town to prepare food. Levi had the main house cleaned and decorated with pine boughs and ribbons. A massive tree was cut and brought in, and Amelia spent an afternoon making paper decorations with Rosa's assistance, Daniel watching from his basket with wide, curious eyes. You're nervous, Rosa observed as they worked. Terrified, Amelia admitted. What if people don't come? What if they do come, but only to judge us? What if we can't convince them? Mija. Rosa set down the ribbon she'd been cutting and took Amelia's hands. You cannot control what people think. You can only show them the truth and hope they have eyes to see it. But I have watched you and Levi these past months. I have seen how he looks at you when you're not watching. I have seen how you soften when he enters a room. That is not something you can fake. But what if it's not enough? Then it's not enough. But you will have tried, you will have fought, and that is all anyone can do. The night of the party arrived with crisp, clear weather and a sky full of stars. Guests began arriving at dusk. Ranchers Levi did business with, the banker from Millbrook, Dr. Morrison, Sheriff Boone, and to Amelia's surprise, several families from Red Hollow, including Mayor Thornton and his wife. Amelia stood beside Levi in the entrance hall, greeting each arrival, Daniel asleep upstairs in the care of one of the ranch hand's wives. She wore a new dress Levi had commissioned, deep green wool that brought out the color of her eyes, and she'd pinned her hair up with combs Rosa had lent her. You look beautiful, Levi murmured between guests, his hand at the small of her back. You have to say that. You're my husband. I don't have to say anything. I choose to. There's a difference. The house filled with people, conversation, and the smell of Rosa's cooking. Amelia moved through the crowd with Levi at her side, accepting congratulations on their marriage, graciously acknowledging compliments about the house and the decorations. But she was keenly aware of the watching eyes, the assessing glances. These people weren't just here for a party. They were here to judge whether this marriage was real. Martha Hensley approached midway through the evening, her expression carefully neutral. Mrs. Callahan, lovely party. Thank you, Mrs. Hensley. There was an awkward pause. Then Martha's face crumpled slightly. I owe you an apology for what I said, for how I treated you. I was cruel and judgmental, and I'm ashamed of myself. Amelia blinked in surprise. Thank you. I've watched you tonight with your husband and heard people talk about how you are with your son. It's clear I was wrong about you. about both of you. Martha hesitated. I hope you can forgive me. I can, Amelia said softly. We all make mistakes. After Martha moved away, Levi leaned close. That took courage, for her to admit she was wrong. Or she's worried about being on your bad side. Maybe both. He smiled slightly. Either way, it's a public acknowledgement. That helps. As the evening progressed, Amelia began to relax. People seemed genuinely pleased to be there. The conversation flowed naturally. And when Levi touched her, his hand on her back, his fingers brushing hers, his arm around her waist, it didn't feel performative. It felt right. Near midnight, as the party was winding down, Levi called for everyone's attention. Thank you all for coming tonight, he said, his voice carrying easily through the room. Amelia and I wanted to share our first Christmas as a married couple with the people who matter to us, with our friends and neighbors and community. He turned to look at Amelia, and something in his expression made her breath catch. I know there's been talk, questions about our marriage, about the circumstances that brought us together, and I want to address that directly. A hush fell over the room. This wasn't what people had expected. Yes, Amelia and I married quickly. Yes, our son was born earlier than traditional timing would dictate. And yes, we've faced judgment because of those facts. His voice hardened slightly, but I want to make something absolutely clear. I married Amelia because I chose to, because I wanted her in my life, because she's made me better than I was alone. He took Amelia's hand, his grip firm and warm. This isn't a marriage of convenience. It's not a business arrangement. It's not a solution to a problem. It's a partnership between two people who found each other against all odds and decided they were stronger together than apart. Levi looked back at the assembled guests. So to anyone who has questions about the legitimacy of this marriage, I say this. Come spend a day with us. Watch how we live. See how we are with each other and with our son. And then tell me this isn't real. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Dr. Morrison started clapping, and others joined in until the room rang with applause. Amelia felt tears prick her eyes. Levi had just laid bare their entire situation in front of dozens of witnesses, daring anyone to question it. After the guests departed and the house was quiet again, Amelia and Levi stood together in the dimly lit parlor, exhaustion and relief washing over them in equal measure. That was quite a speech, Amelia said. It needed to be said. Let them take that back to their friends and families. Let it spread through the territory. The more people who hear it directly from me, the harder it'll be for the syndicate to paint a different picture. You're very strategic. I'm very determined. He pulled her close. I meant every word, though, in case you were wondering. I know. She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. I love you, Levi Callahan. I love you too. They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other and in the quiet aftermath of their declaration. Upstairs, Daniel would be waking soon, demanding to be fed. Tomorrow, they'd have to face whatever new challenges the syndicate threw at them. But tonight, they had this. The hearing was scheduled for the first week of January. As the date approached, Catherine prepared them for what to expect. The syndicate's lawyer will try to rattle you, she warned. He'll ask invasive questions. He'll try to make your relationship sound tawdry or transactional. Don't let him provoke you into anger. Answer honestly but briefly. And remember, you don't owe him your life story, just the truth about your marriage. What kind of questions? Amelia asked. About how you met? About the circumstances of Daniel's conception? About your financial situation before and after the marriage? About whether Levi offered you money or property in exchange for marriage? About whether you've been intimate since the wedding or if you maintain separate bedrooms? Amelia felt her face heat. They can ask about that. They can ask about anything they think is relevant to proving fraud. Whether the judge allows it is another matter, but be prepared for uncomfortable questions. On the morning of the hearing, Amelia dressed carefully in her best dress and braided her hair with shaking hands. Daniel was being left in Rosa's care for the day, and saying goodbye to him felt like tearing out part of her heart. We'll be back before dark, Levi assured Rosa, though his own expression was tight with tension. The courthouse in Millbrook was a stolid brick building that seemed designed to intimidate. Inside, the courtroom was cold and formal, with wooden benches and a raised judge's bench that loomed over everything. The syndicate's lawyer was a man named Harrison Webb, silver-haired and distinguished, with the kind of smooth confidence that came from winning more cases than he lost. He nodded pleasantly to Levi and Amelia as they entered, as if they were all here for a friendly discussion rather than a battle that could destroy everything they'd built. Judge Mitchell was a weathered man in his 60s who'd been presiding over territorial disputes for 20 years. He listened with impassive expression as Webb laid out his case. Your Honor, the evidence will show that this marriage was entered into fraudulently for the purpose of manipulating land claims and territorial regulations. Mr. Callahan married Miss Rowan, a woman with no resources, no family, and no prospects, immediately after publicly claiming a child of questionable parentage. The timing alone suggests calculation rather than affection. Catherine rose to object. The timing suggests a man taking responsibility for his child and the woman he loves. Since when is that fraudulent? When it's done to circumvent laws designed to prevent land consolidation by single entities, Webb countered smoothly. The judge held up a hand. I'll hear testimony before making any determinations. Mr. Webb, call your first witness. What followed was a grueling parade of testimony. Webb called people from Red Hollow who testified to Amelia's poverty and isolation before the marriage, painting her as desperate enough to enter any arrangement that promised security. He called a land surveyor who testified to the value of Levi's holdings and the legal advantages marriage provided in consolidating them. But when Catherine cross-examined, she dismantled their testimonies piece by piece. You testified that Mrs. Callahan was desperate for security, she said to Martha Hensley, who'd been called by the other side despite her apology at the party.
But isn't it true that she refused multiple marriage proposals before accepting Mr. Callahan's? Martha shifted uncomfortably. Well, yes, but... And isn't it true that she was supporting herself through honest work with no debts and no legal troubles? Yes. So desperate isn't quite accurate, is it? She was poor but independent, struggling but surviving. That's not the profile of a woman who'd enter a fraudulent marriage for money. When it was the defense's turn, Catherine called Dr. Morrison first. Can you describe Mr. Callahan's demeanor during the birth of his son? He was terrified, the doctor said bluntly. I've seen many fathers at births, and most wait outside or pace nervously. Mr. Callahan stayed by Mrs. Callahan's side through the entire labor. He held her hand. He encouraged her. And when the baby was born premature and we weren't sure if he'd survive, Mr. Callahan wept. Webb objected. Emotional displays don't prove the legitimacy of a marriage. No, Catherine agreed, but they prove genuine feeling. And that's what's at question here, isn't it? Whether this marriage is genuine. Sheriff Boone testified next, describing the scene in Red Hollow when Levi had claimed Daniel as his own. I've known Callahan for 15 years, Boone said. He's not a demonstrative man, keeps his emotions locked down tight. But that day in the town square, he looked at Mrs. Rowan, Mrs. Callahan, like she was the only thing that mattered in the world. Like he'd burned down the town before he'd let anyone hurt her. Objection, Webb said. Speculation about Mr. Callahan's feelings. Sustained, the judge said, but Amelia could see he was listening. Rosa testified about the weeks after Daniel's birth, describing how Levi had moved into the cottage to help with night feedings, how he'd built the cradle with his own hands, how he'd paced the floor for hours soothing his crying son. Finally, Catherine called Levi to the stand. Webb's cross-examination was brutal. He asked about Levi's business interests, about the legal advantages of marriage, about whether he'd offered Amelia money or property as inducement. I offered her protection, Levi said evenly. I offered her my name and my support, not as payment, but as responsibility. Convenient that this responsibility came with significant legal and financial benefits for you. The benefits were incidental. I would have married her regardless. Would you? Even if there were no land claims involved? Even if it cost you financially rather than benefiting you? Yes. Webb's smile was sharp. That's easy to say now, but the fact remains that you married a woman you barely knew, under circumstances that raised questions, at a time when such a marriage provided you with legal advantages. How is that not fraud? Because fraud requires intent to deceive, Levi said, his voice hardening.
I never deceived anyone. I claim my child publicly. I married the woman I loved. I built a life with her. Where's the deception in that? The deception is in pretending this was about love when it was clearly about, I love her. The words cut through Webb's sentence like a blade. Levi leaned forward, his gaze locked on the lawyer. I love my wife. I love my son. And I would marry her again tomorrow. And every day after, regardless of what it cost me. So you can question the timing. You can question the circumstances. But don't you dare question what I feel. The courtroom went silent. Webb recovered quickly, but Amelia could see he'd lost ground. When Amelia took the stand, she was terrified. But as Catherine had coached her, she answered questions honestly and simply. Did Mr. Callahan offer you money to marry him? No. Did he promise you property or financial security in exchange for marriage? No. He offered me protection when I needed it. He offered our son a name and a father. He offered me partnership. And have you been happy in this marriage? Amelia looked directly at Levi, who sat with rigid posture at the defense table. Yes, happier than I ever thought possible. Webb's cross-examination tried to shake her, tried to suggest she'd been motivated by desperation and poverty, but Amelia held firm. I married him because I love him, she said simply. Everything else is just details. After final arguments, the judge called for a recess to deliberate. Catherine pulled Levi and Amelia aside in the hallway. That was good. You were both excellent on the stand, but Mitchell's hard to read. This could go either way. They waited for 2 hours, an eternity of pacing and silence and mounting tension. Finally, the bailiff called them back. Judge Mitchell looked tired as he took his seat. I've reviewed the testimony and the evidence, he began, and I'm prepared to make my ruling. Amelia felt Levi's hand find hers under the table, his grip tight. The plaintiffs argue that this marriage was entered into fraudulently for financial and legal gain. They've presented evidence of suspicious timing and convenient circumstances, and I'll admit, viewed from a certain angle, their argument has merit. Amelia's heart sank. However, the judge continued, fraud requires more than suspicious circumstances. It requires proof of deceptive intent and absence of genuine marital commitment. And on that count, the plaintiffs have failed to meet their burden. He looked directly at Levi and Amelia. I've seen fraudulent marriages. They're characterized by separation, by lack of genuine partnership, by evidence that the parties involved are merely play acting. That's not what I see here. What I see is two people who married under difficult circumstances and have since built a genuine life together. They share a home. They're raising a child together. Multiple witnesses have testified to observing real affection and partnership between them. The judge's expression softened slightly. Could there have been additional motivations beyond love? Perhaps. Human beings are complex, and we rarely do anything for only one reason. But the existence of practical benefits doesn't negate the presence of genuine feeling. These two people love each other. That much is clear. He banged his gavel. I find in favor of the defendants, the marriage between Levi and Amelia Callahan is legitimate and legally binding. The plaintiff's challenge to the Callahan land claims is denied. Court dismissed. For a moment, Amelia couldn't process the words. Then Catherine was hugging her, and Levi was pulling her close, and relief washed through her so intensely she felt lightheaded. We won, she whispered against Levi's chest. We won, he confirmed, his arms tightening around her. Outside the courthouse, Levi stopped her before they reached the wagon. I need to say something. What? Thank you for standing with me through this, for being strong when they tried to tear you apart, for loving me even when it would have been easier not to. Levi, I mean it. His hands framed her face. You are the strongest person I've ever known, and I'm honored to be your husband. Amelia kissed him then, there on the courthouse steps, not caring who saw. They rode home as the sun set, painting the winter landscape in shades of gold and rose. When they reached the ranch, Rosa met them at the door with Daniel in her arms. Well, she demanded. We won, Amelia said, taking her son and holding him close. Rosa's face broke into a huge smile. Gracias a Dios, I knew you would. That night, after Daniel was fed and sleeping, Amelia and Levi sat together in front of the fire. The ordeal was over. The threat had been defeated.
Their marriage had been tested and proven real. "What happens now?" Amelia asked. "Now?" Levi pulled her closer. "Now we live. We raise our son. We build our life together without anyone questioning it. We just be." "Just be," Amelia repeated, liking the sound of it. And as the fire crackled and the winter wind whispered outside, they did exactly that. Winter deepened across the territory, bringing snow that transformed the ranch into something from a storybook. Amelia had never experienced a winter quite like this. Not just the weather, but the feeling of being warm and safe while the world outside turned white and still. Daniel thrived. At 3 months old, he'd grown from that fragile premature infant into a robust baby with Levi's gray-blue eyes and Amelia's dark hair. He smiled now, real smiles that lit up his whole face, and the sound of his laugh had become Levi's favorite thing in the world. "He's going to be spoiled," Amelia observed one evening, watching Levi bounce their son on his knee while making exaggerated faces that sent Daniel into peals of delighted giggles. "Impossible. He's perfect. Perfect things can't be spoiled." "That's exactly what a man spoiling his child would say." Levi grinned, unrepentant. "Then I guess he's doomed to be spoiled. I can live with that." The legal victory had changed something in both of them. The constant tension they'd been carrying, the fear that everything could be ripped away at any moment, had finally eased. They could simply be a family now, without looking over their shoulders. But peace, Amelia was learning, didn't mean the absence of challenges. It just meant facing them together. The first real test came in late January when Levi announced he needed to travel to Denver for business meetings that would keep him away for at least a week, possibly longer. The Cattlemen's Association is negotiating new shipping contracts with the railroads, he explained as they prepared for bed. "If I don't go, we could lose significant leverage on pricing for next season." "I understand," Amelia said, though her stomach tightened at the thought of him being gone so long. "You could come with me. Bring Daniel. We could make it a trip." A week-long journey in winter with a 3-month-old baby? That sounds like a disaster waiting to happen. "It does, doesn't it?" Levi sighed. "I just don't like leaving you. I'll be fine. I have Rosa and Marcus and all the hands. The ranch won't fall apart in a week." But secretly, she was nervous. She'd grown accustomed to Levi's presence, to his steady competence in handling problems, to the security of knowing he was there if anything went wrong. Levi left on a Monday morning, kissing both her and Daniel goodbye with clear reluctance. "If anything happens, anything at all, you send Marcus to fetch me immediately. I don't care if the meetings are important. You're more important." "We'll be fine," Amelia assured him, trying to sound more confident than she felt. The first 2 days passed uneventfully. Amelia fell into a routine of caring for Daniel, helping Rosa with household tasks, and even venturing out to the barn to check on a mare that was due to foal soon. She was discovering that she liked ranch life, the rhythm of it, the purposeful work, the connection to land and animals. But on the 3rd day, trouble arrived in the form of 3 men on horseback. Amelia was in the kitchen with Rosa when Marcus came to the back door, his expression tight with concern. "Mrs. Callahan, there are men here asking for Levi. Say they have business with him." "What kind of business?" "Didn't say, but they're armed, and they don't look friendly." Amelia's pulse quickened. "Where are they now?" "I told them to wait in the yard. Didn't seem right to invite them in with the boss away." "You did right." Amelia handed Daniel to Rosa. "Stay inside with him. Lock the doors." "Mija, you shouldn't go out there alone." "I'm not alone. I have Marcus and the other hands." She tried to sound braver than she felt. "Besides, I'm the lady of this house. If there's business to be handled in my husband's absence, it's my responsibility to handle it." She grabbed her shawl and walked out to the yard with Marcus beside her. 3 men sat on horseback near the main gate, and Amelia recognized the leader immediately. James Hartley, the same man who'd come months ago asking invasive questions, the one who worked for the syndicate. "Mr. Hartley," she said coolly, "this is unexpected." "Mrs. Callahan." He touched his hat brim in mock courtesy. "I was hoping to speak with your husband. He's not here." "So I gathered.
When do you expect him back? I don't see how that's your business. Hartley's smile didn't reach his eyes. Now, no need for hostility. We're all civilized people here. I just have some papers that require his signature. What kind of papers? Business matters. Nothing for you to worry your pretty head about. The condescension in his tone made Amelia's spine stiffen. Any business matters concerning this ranch concern me. I'm Mr. Callahan's wife and partner. You can show me the papers. I'm afraid these require the owner's signature specifically. I am co-owner of this property, Amelia interrupted, drawing on the legal knowledge Catherine had made sure she understood after the hearing. As Mr. Callahan's legal wife, I have equal authority in matters concerning our holdings. So either show me what you want him to sign or leave this property. Hartley's pleasant facade cracked slightly. You're quite bold for someone in your position. My position as the lady of this ranch? Yes, I suppose I am. She crossed her arms. Now, are you going to tell me what this is really about, or should I have my foreman escort you off the property? One of Hartley's companions shifted in his saddle, hand moving toward his gun. Immediately, Marcus stepped forward, and Amelia heard movement behind her. The other ranch hands had emerged from the barn, all armed. I wouldn't, Marcus said quietly. Hartley held up a hand to stop his man. No need for violence. We're just here to conduct business. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded document. Since you insist, Mrs. Callahan, you can see for yourself. It's a very generous offer to purchase the Callahan holdings. We're not selling. You haven't even looked at the price. I don't need to. This land isn't for sale at any price. Perhaps your husband would feel differently, especially when he learns about the alternative. Something in Hartley's tone sent ice through Amelia's veins. What alternative? Well, the syndicate has been investigating certain irregularities in water rights claims along the northern boundary of your property. It seems there may be disputes about the legitimacy of those claims. Disputes that could tie up the ranch in legal proceedings for years. Unless, of course, we could reach a more amicable arrangement. It was a threat dressed up as a business proposition. Buy the land or face more legal harassment. Get off our property, Amelia said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Mrs. Callahan, now, before I have my men remove you forcibly. Hartley's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. Your husband isn't here to protect you. You're alone and vulnerable. It would be wise to reconsider. She's not alone. The voice came from behind Amelia, and she turned to see Sheriff Boone dismounting from his horse. He must have arrived while she was focused on Hartley. Sheriff, Hartley said with forced pleasantness, this doesn't concern you. When armed men show up at a ranch to threaten a woman whose husband is out of town, it absolutely concerns me. Boone moved to stand beside Amelia. I believe Mrs. Callahan asked you to leave. I suggest you do so before I find a reason to arrest you for trespassing. On what grounds? On the grounds that she's asked you to leave her private property, and you're still here arguing. Boone's hand rested casually on his gun. That's trespassing where I come from. Hartley stared at them for a long moment, then smiled coldly. This isn't over. Yes, it is, Amelia said. And when my husband returns, he'll make sure your syndicate understands that very clearly. After Hartley and his men rode away, Amelia felt her knees go weak. Boone caught her elbow, steadying her. You all right, Mrs. Callahan? Yes. Thank you for arriving when you did. I was on my way to check on you anyway. Levi asked me to stop by while he was gone, make sure everything was peaceful. Boone looked toward where Hartley had disappeared. Seems like he had good instincts about that. They threatened legal action, something about water rights. It's nonsense. Levi's claims are solid, but they're trying to intimidate you while he's gone. The sheriff's expression was grim. You should send word to Denver. Let him know what happened. No. Amelia straightened, pushing down her fear. These meetings are important. He needs to focus on them. I can handle this. You sure about that? No, but I'm going to try anyway. After Boone left, Amelia went back inside to find Rosa pacing with Daniel. What happened? Threats. More attempts to pressure us into selling. Amelia took her son and held him close, drawing strength from his solid warmth. But they're gone now. They'll be back. Probably, but we'll deal with it when they do. That night, Amelia lay awake thinking about Hartley's visit. The syndicate wasn't going to give up. They'd lost the legal battle, but they were trying other tactics now: intimidation, threats, wearing them down through constant pressure. She got up and went to Levi's study, lighting a lamp. His desk was neat and organized, everything in its place. She found the land claim documents in a locked drawer. Levi had shown her where he kept the key, and spread them out, studying the boundaries and water rights. Her father had taught her to read maps before he died, and she'd picked up more legal knowledge from Catherine during the trial. Now she used both skills to trace the northern boundary Hartley had mentioned. There was nothing irregular about the water rights claims. Everything was properly documented and filed. Hartley had been bluffing, trying to scare her. But knowing it was a bluff didn't make the threat less real. The syndicate had resources and lawyers. They could tie up the ranch in legal battles, even if those battles were ultimately baseless. They could make life difficult enough that selling seemed like the easier option. Amelia sat back in Levi's chair, thinking. Then she pulled out paper and ink and began writing letters. Over the next 2 days, she wrote to every neighboring rancher, to the Territorial Land Office, to the Cattlemen's Association in Denver, where Levi was attending meetings. She documented Hartley's visit, his threats, his attempts at intimidation. She made sure there was a written record of the syndicate's tactics. Catherine had taught her an important lesson during the trial. Documentation was power. If this escalated, they'd need proof of harassment. Marcus found her in the study late the second night, squinting at legal documents by lamplight. "Mrs. Callahan, you should rest. You've been at this for hours." "I need to understand our position. I need to know exactly what we're dealing with." "The boss wouldn't want you wearing yourself out." "The boss isn't here. I am." She looked up at Marcus. "How long have you worked for Levi?" "Going on 12 years now?" "Then you know how hard he's fought to build this place, how much it means to him." "I do." "I won't let someone take it from him through intimidation and threats. Not while I'm breathing." She set down her pen. "I need you to help me understand something. The water rights on the northern boundary. How critical are they?" Marcus considered. "Pretty critical. That's where the main creek runs. Cut off access to that water, and we'd struggle to sustain the herd through summer. So if they did manage to challenge our water rights successfully, they wouldn't. Levi's claims are rock solid, but even a baseless challenge could tie things up for months, maybe longer. And without guaranteed water access, we couldn't sell cattle contracts for next season, which is exactly what they want. Make it impossible for us to operate profitably until we're desperate enough to sell." "Seems like it." Amelia nodded slowly. "Then we need to make sure that doesn't happen. I want you to ride to the northern boundary tomorrow. Document everything: the water sources, the markers, the boundary stones. Take photographs if you can. I want evidence of our legitimate claim that's so thorough no lawyer could question it." Marcus smiled slightly. "You're starting to think like a rancher, Mrs. Callahan." "I'm starting to think like a wife protecting her husband's legacy. There's a difference." But was there? Amelia was discovering that the two were increasingly intertwined. This ranch, this land, this life, it wasn't just Levi's anymore. It was theirs, hers and Daniel's as much as his, and she would fight for it with everything she had. When Levi returned 6 days later, road-worn and tired, he found Amelia in the study, surrounded by documents and maps. "What's all this?" She stood and went to him, relief flooding through her at his presence. "We had visitors while you were gone." His expression immediately darkened. "What kind of visitors?" She told him everything: Hartley's arrival, his threats, Boone's intervention, and all the work she'd done in the aftermath. Levi listened without interrupting, his jaw growing tighter with each detail. When she finished, he pulled her into a fierce embrace. "I should never have left. If something had happened to you or Daniel," "Nothing happened. We're fine, and I handled it. You shouldn't have had to handle it alone." Amelia pulled back to look at him. "But I did handle it. I stood up to them. I protected our interests. I did what needed to be done." She took his hand and placed it over her heart. "I'm not the same frightened woman you found in that broken wagon, Levi. I'm stronger now because of you, because of this life we're building. You taught me that strength." Levi's expression softened. "You always had that strength. You just needed the space to use it." "Well, I used it, and I'll use it again if I have to." He kissed her then, deep and claiming. and Amelia felt something shift between them. This wasn't gratitude or duty or even just love. This was partnership in its truest form. Two people who trusted each other completely, who knew they could rely on one another when things got difficult. Later, after Daniel was asleep and they were alone in their bedroom, Levi showed her the contracts he'd secured in Denver. Best prices we've ever gotten for cattle. The railroad agreed to favorable shipping terms for the next 3 years. It's going to make a significant difference to our profitability. Our profitability, Amelia echoed. I like the sound of that. You're my partner in this, Amelia, in everything. I should have made that more clear from the start. You've shown me in 100 different ways. I don't need the words. Maybe not, but you deserve them anyway. He set aside the contracts and took her hands. I've been thinking while I was traveling about the future, about what we're building here. What have you been thinking? That this ranch needs to be more than just my legacy. It should be ours, Daniel's, any other children we might have. He paused. I want to put your name on the deed, make you equal owner legally, not just in practice. Amelia felt tears prick her eyes. Levi, it's not just sentiment, it's practical too. If something happens to me, I need to know you and Daniel will be protected, that no one can challenge your right to this place. Nothing's going to happen to you. You don't know that. Life is uncertain, but property law is very certain. With your name on the deed, no one, not the syndicate, not anyone, can question your authority here. The syndicate will see it as weakness. They'll think you're protecting assets by transferring ownership. Let them think what they want. The truth is I'm recognizing what already exists. You're my partner. You should be recognized as such legally. They filed the paperwork the following week. Catherine handled it personally, making sure every detail was perfect and legally unassailable. When Amelia signed her name to the deed, Amelia Callahan, co-owner, she felt a profound shift. This wasn't just Levi's land anymore. It was hers too. She had real power, real authority, real stake in the future of this place. The syndicate's response came within days. Another threatening letter, more vague implications about legal challenges. But this time, Levi didn't handle it alone. He and Amelia sat together at his desk and crafted a response that was both diplomatic and absolutely unyielding. We need to make it clear that continued harassment will have consequences, Amelia said. Agreed, but we need to be careful not to provoke them into actual legal action. They worked late into the night, drafting and redrafting until they had something that struck the right balance. The letter acknowledged the syndicate's interest, but firmly declined their offers and warned that continued trespassing or intimidation would result in criminal complaints and civil action for harassment. Think it'll work? Amelia asked as Levi sealed the envelope. Probably not, but it establishes our position clearly, shows them we're united and not backing down. Then it's worth doing. Spring came early that year, melting the snow and turning the brown landscape green almost overnight. Daniel was sitting up now, fascinated by everything around him. Levi would take him out to the barn, showing him the horses and cattle with patient explanations that the baby couldn't possibly understand but seemed to enjoy anyway. Amelia found herself falling more deeply in love with both of them every day, with Daniel's curious wonder at the world, with Levi's gentle strength and unwavering presence. One warm April evening, they sat on the porch together, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Daniel was drowsy in Amelia's arms, fighting sleep the way he always did. I've been thinking about something, Levi said quietly. What's that? About expanding, not the ranch. We're at a good size now, but the house, adding on a wing for more bedrooms. Planning on having more children, Mr. Callahan? I'm hoping for it, Mrs. Callahan. If you're willing, Amelia smiled. I might be convinced. Just convinced? I'll have to work harder to persuade you. You could start by helping with the night feedings. I already do half of them. Then you could do the other half too. Levi laughed, and the sound filled Amelia with contentment. This simple moment of teasing and planning and being together was everything she'd never known she wanted. A week later, riders appeared on the horizon, but this time they were familiar. Sheriff Boone and Catherine Mills, along with a man Amelia didn't recognize, well-dressed and official-looking. They gathered in Levi's study, and the stranger introduced himself as Gerald Thompson, Territorial Land Commissioner. "I've been investigating the complaints filed regarding water rights on your northern boundary," Thompson said without preamble, "as well as the harassment claims you documented." Amelia and Levi exchanged glances. "And?" Levi asked. "And I'm here to inform you that the syndicate's claims are completely without merit. Your water rights are properly documented and legally sound. Furthermore, their pattern of harassment and intimidation has been noted in my official report." "What does that mean practically?" Amelia asked. "It means they have no legal grounds to challenge your claims. It also means that if they continue their harassment campaign, they'll face sanctions from the territorial government." Thompson pulled out documents. "I'll need you both to sign affidavits confirming the harassment you've documented. Those will become part of the official record." Catherine was smiling. "This is better than I hoped. An official finding in your favor essentially kills any future legal challenges the syndicate might attempt." After Thompson left with their signed affidavits, Boone lingered. "You two have made some powerful enemies," he said, "but you've also made some powerful allies. That counts for something." "It counts for everything," Levi said, his arm around Amelia's waist. That night, as they prepared for bed, Amelia felt lighter than she had in months. "Is it really over?" she asked. "Can we finally just live without constantly waiting for the next attack?" "I think so. The syndicate won't give up their ambitions, but they'll have to find other targets. We've made ourselves too difficult, too costly to pursue." "Good." Amelia turned in his arms. "Because I'm tired of fighting. I want to just be happy." "Then be happy." Levi kissed her forehead. "We've earned it." And they had. Through everything, the scandal, the rushed marriage, the legal battles, the threats and intimidation, they'd survived. More than survived. They'd built something real and strong and worth protecting. As spring deepened into summer, the ranch flourished. The cattle thrived. The horses bred successfully. And in the main house, the Callahan family grew in love and laughter, and the quiet certainty that they'd weathered the worst storms and emerged stronger for it. Daniel took his first steps in June, stumbling from Levi to Amelia and back again with delighted shrieks. Watching him, Amelia marveled at how much had changed in a single year. From that desperate winter night in a broken wagon to this, a home, a family, a future full of possibility. "What are you thinking?" Levi asked, catching her expression. "That I'm happy. Truly, completely happy." "Good, because you deserve to be. We both do." And as the summer sun set over their land, turning everything golden and warm, Amelia knew with absolute certainty that they'd found something rare and precious. Not just love, though there was that in abundance. Not just partnership, though they had that too. They'd found home. But peace, as Amelia was learning, was never truly permanent. It was something that had to be maintained, defended, and sometimes fought for all over again. The final challenge came in September, when Daniel was nearly a year old and walking with increasing confidence. Amelia had just finished hanging laundry when she saw a lone rider approaching the ranch, not from the main road, but from the direction of Red Hollow. Something about the rider's posture made her uneasy. She called for Marcus, who appeared from the barn with his usual promptness. "Someone's coming. I don't recognize the horse." Marcus shaded his eyes against the afternoon sun. "That's Doc Morrison's gelding, but that's not the doc riding it." As the rider drew closer, Amelia recognized her with a jolt. It was Martha Hensley, looking windblown and anxious. "Mrs. Callahan," Martha called out as she dismounted awkwardly. "Thank heavens you're here. I borrowed the doctor's horse. It was the fastest one I could find." "What's wrong?" "It's the doctor. He's been called to the Peterson place for an emergency, but there's another emergency in town. Sarah Chen went into labor early, and it's not going well. The midwife is sick, and there's no one else who—" Martha's words tumbled over each other. "I remembered what people said about Daniel's birth, how you and Mr. Callahan managed when the doctor wasn't there. I know it's asking a lot, but where's Levi?" Amelia interrupted. "Out with the hands checking the eastern fence line. Marcus, you know where they are?" Marcus nodded. "I can fetch him." "No." Amelia made a decision. "Sarah needs help now. We don't have time to wait." She turned to Rosa, who'd emerged from the house. "Can you watch Daniel?" "Of course, mija, but you cannot deliver a baby alone. I won't be alone. Martha will help me." Amelia looked at the other woman. "Won't you?" Martha's eyes widened. I don't know anything about." "Neither did I before Daniel. But we'll figure it out together." Amelia was already moving toward the house. "Rosa, I need clean linens, hot water ready to heat, and those medical supplies Dr. Morrison left for Daniel. Marcus, when Levi gets back, tell him where I've gone." 20 minutes later, Amelia was riding toward Red Hollow with Martha, her heart pounding but her hands steady. She'd spent months learning from Dr. Morrison during his visits to check on Daniel, had asked him questions about what could go wrong during birth, how to handle complications, what signs meant danger. She'd never expected to use that knowledge. But here she was. The Chen family lived above their laundry business on Main Street. Sarah's husband, James, met them at the door, his face drawn with fear. "Thank you for coming. I didn't know who else. The doctor is hours away, and Sarah, she's—" His voice broke. "Take me to her," Amelia said with more confidence than she felt. Sarah was in bed, her face pale and slicked with sweat, breathing hard through contractions. She couldn't have been more than 19, and the fear in her eyes was heartbreakingly familiar. "Sarah, I'm Amelia Callahan. I'm here to help you." "You're not a doctor." Sarah's voice was tight with pain. "No, but I've been through this myself. My son was born early, without a doctor, and we both survived. You can too." Amelia washed her hands and examined Sarah as carefully as she could, remembering everything Dr. Morrison had taught her. The baby's position seemed wrong, not head down like it should be. "Martha, I need you to keep Sarah calm and help her breathe through the contractions. Can you do that?" Martha nodded, moving to Sarah's other side and taking her hand. Amelia stepped out into the hallway where James was pacing. "The baby's breech. Feet first instead of head first." James went white. "What does that mean?" "It means this will be more difficult, but not impossible. I need you to stay calm. Your wife needs you to be strong right now. Can you do this? Can you deliver a breech baby?" Amelia thought of Rosa's words during Daniel's birth. Bodies know what they're doing, and she thought of Levi's steady presence, his calm certainty, even when everything seemed impossible. "Yes," she said. "I can do this." What followed were the longest hours of Amelia's life. Sarah's labor was slow and agonizing. The baby wouldn't turn despite Amelia's attempts to manipulate the position externally. Finally, as evening turned to night, there was no choice but to proceed with the breech delivery. "Sarah, listen to me," Amelia said, her voice firm but gentle. "Your baby is strong. I can feel them kicking, but we need to work together to bring them into this world safely. When I tell you to push, you push as hard as you can, and when I tell you to stop, you stop completely. Can you do that?" Sarah nodded, too exhausted for words. The delivery was terrifying. Amelia had to reach in and guide the baby's legs out, then the body, supporting the tiny weight carefully while Sarah pushed with everything she had. Martha held Sarah's hand and whispered encouragement, and James stood in the corner praying in Chinese. When the baby's head finally emerged and the infant drew its first breath with a furious wail, Amelia nearly collapsed with relief. "It's a girl," she announced, her voice shaking. "You have a daughter." Sarah started crying. James rushed forward, and Amelia cleaned and wrapped the baby with trembling hands before placing her on Sarah's chest. "She's perfect," Sarah whispered. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Amelia stayed until Dr. Morrison arrived 2 hours later, summoned from the Peterson place by a rider James had sent. The doctor examined both mother and baby and pronounced them healthy, then turned to Amelia with respect in his eyes. "A breech delivery without medical training. That took skill and courage, Mrs. Callahan. I just did what needed to be done. That's what good medicine is. Doing what needs to be done, even when you're terrified." When Amelia finally rode back to the ranch near midnight, she found Levi waiting on the porch, his face drawn with worry. "Are you all right? Marcus said you went to help with a birth." "I'm fine. Sarah Chen and her baby are both fine." Amelia dismounted and Levi caught her as her legs nearly gave out. "It was terrifying, Levi. What if something had gone wrong? What if I'd made a mistake?" "But you didn't. You saved 2 lives tonight." He held her close. "I'm proud of you."
I couldn't have done it without everything I learned from Dr. Morrison, and without remembering how you stayed calm during Daniel's birth, even when you must have been terrified. I was absolutely terrified. I just didn't let it show. He kissed the top of her head. Come inside. Rosa kept dinner warm, and Daniel's been asking for you. Word of what Amelia had done spread through Red Hollow faster than wildfire. By the next morning, people were talking about how Levi Callahan's wife had saved Sarah Chen and her baby, how she'd handled a dangerous delivery with skill and courage. The town's perception shifted again. This time, it wasn't about scandal or judgment, it was about respect. Over the following weeks, people began coming to Amelia with medical questions. Nothing serious. Dr. Morrison was still the primary physician, but small things. How to treat a child's fever, what to do about a persistent cough, whether a wound needed stitches. You're becoming the town healer, Levi observed one evening after Amelia had spent an hour advising one of the ranch hands' wives about her daughter's earache. I'm not a healer, I'm just someone who pays attention and remembers what the doctor teaches me. That's what a healer is, someone who pays attention and actually cares about helping people, Dr. Morrison himself encouraged her. You have good instincts, Mrs. Callahan, and there's a real need for medical knowledge in these territories. If you're interested, I could teach you more formally. Not to replace me, but to complement my practice. I'm not getting any younger, and this territory keeps growing. Amelia found herself saying yes before she'd fully thought it through. And so began a new chapter, writing out with Dr. Morrison on his calls, learning anatomy and treatment protocols, discovering that she had a talent for diagnosis and a gentle manner that put patients at ease. Who would have thought, she said to Levi one night as she studied medical texts by lamplight. A year and a half ago, I was mending clothes in a shack by the creek. Now I'm learning medicine. You were always capable of this. You just needed the opportunity. The opportunity you gave me. This life, this education, this purpose. It's all because you claimed our son that day in Red Hollow. No. Levi looked up from the ranch ledgers he'd been reviewing. It's all because you're remarkable. I just recognized that and gave you space to show everyone else. In November, a letter arrived from the territorial governor's office. The syndicate was dissolving. Their aggressive land acquisition campaign had drawn too much official scrutiny, and several of their board members were facing legal consequences for fraud and corruption. It's really over, Amelia said, reading the letter twice to be sure. They can't come after us anymore. They never really could, Levi said. We just had to prove it. That night, they celebrated quietly, just the two of them and Daniel, who was now walking confidently and attempting words that were almost recognizable. They sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge, Daniel drowsy between them. Do you ever think about that storm? Amelia asked. About how different everything would be if your path hadn't crossed mine that night? All the time. It was the luckiest moment of my life. Lucky? I was stranded in a blizzard with a broken wagon. Lucky for me, because I found you. He shifted Daniel to one arm so he could put the other around Amelia. I'd lived 34 years thinking I had everything figured out, thinking being alone was safer, smarter, better. Then one winter night, I found a woman freezing to death, and everything I thought I knew changed. You saved my life that night. And you saved mine, just in a different way. December brought the first anniversary of their wedding. Levi arranged for Rosa to watch Daniel and took Amelia to Millbrook for a night, their first time away from the ranch together since Daniel's birth. They had dinner at the nicest hotel restaurant, and Levi presented her with a gift wrapped in brown paper. I'm not good at romantic gestures, he said as she unwrapped it, but I wanted to give you something meaningful. Inside was a leather-bound journal, and on the first page, in Levi's careful handwriting, were words that made Amelia's eyes fill with tears. To my wife, my partner, my love. This is for recording our story. The truth of it, not the gossip or the scandal, but what really happened, what we built together, what we became, so that someday, when Daniel and his children ask how we found each other, we can tell them the whole truth, that we were both lost until we found each other in a storm, and that every challenge we faced after that only made us stronger. Levi, Amelia whispered, I love you, Amelia Callahan, more than I thought possible to love anyone, and I wanted you to have something that captured that. She kissed him there in the restaurant, not caring who saw, and felt the rightness of it all. This life, this man, this love they'd built from nothing. When they returned to the ranch the next day, Daniel ran to them with outstretched arms, shouting, "Mama, Papa!" in his excited baby voice way. Amelia scooped him up, breathing in his familiar scent, feeling complete. Spring came again, bringing with it new life on the ranch and new possibilities. Amelia discovered she was pregnant with their second child, and Levi's joy was unbounded. "Another baby," he said, his hand on her still flat belly. "Another piece of our future." "Are you hoping for a boy or a girl?" "I'm hoping for healthy. Everything else is just details." Red Hollow had changed too. The town that had once judged Amelia so harshly now treated her with respect and genuine warmth. When she rode into town for supplies, people greeted her by name. Women asked her medical advice. Children waved. Martha Hensley, who'd helped deliver Sarah Chen's baby, had become an unexpected friend. She'd apologized repeatedly for her earlier cruelty, and Amelia had forgiven her with genuine grace. "You're different now," Martha observed one day over tea. "Confident, strong. You walk through town like you belong here." "I do belong here. It just took everyone, including me, a while to realize it." In May, Sarah Chen brought her daughter to the ranch to visit. The baby, named Amelia in honor of the woman who delivered her, was thriving. "I wanted you to see her," Sarah said. "Wanted you to know that every time I look at her, I think about your courage that night. How you didn't let fear stop you from doing what needed to be done." "I was terrified the entire time." "But you did it anyway. That's real courage." After Sarah left, Amelia stood on the porch holding Daniel while he pointed at butterflies in Rosa's garden. She thought about Sarah's words, about courage not being the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. That's what her entire journey had been, fear and courage intertwined. Fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of being alone. And the courage to accept help, to trust Levi, to build a new life from the ashes of the old one. In June, Levi finished the addition to the house. 3 new bedrooms and a larger kitchen. The ranch was prospering. Their contracts with the railroad were paying off. They'd hired additional hands and were planning to expand the cattle operation. "We should celebrate," Levi said, surveying their expanded home with satisfaction. "How?" "Another party, a summer gathering. Invite everyone who stood by us through the difficult times. Show them what we've built." This party was different from the tense Christmas gathering a year and a half earlier. This was pure celebration. No hidden agenda, no need to prove anything, just people coming together to share in joy. Sheriff Boone attended, as did Dr. Morrison and Catherine Mills, who'd traveled from Denver specifically for the occasion. Rosa presided over the kitchen with her usual competent authority, and Marcus organized games for the children. Mayor Thornton gave a short speech about how the Callahan Ranch represented the best of what the territory could be: hard work, determination, and family values. Amelia caught Levi's eye and had to suppress a smile at the irony. This was the same man who'd condemned her in the town square not 2 years earlier. As evening fell and lanterns were lit around the yard, Amelia found herself standing apart from the crowd, watching it all with a sense of wonder. Martha appeared beside her. "You did this, you know, created all of this." "Levi created this. You gave him a reason to share it. Before you, this ranch was just land and cattle. Now it's a home. Now it's a legacy." Martha smiled. "You changed him. And in doing so, you changed all of us." After the guests departed and the ranch was quiet again, Levi found Amelia in what had become her favorite spot, the porch swing he'd built, overlooking the western pastures. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, settling beside her. "About how far we've come. About that girl in the broken wagon who thought she'd freeze to death in a storm. About the man who stopped to save her, even though he had no obligation to." "I had every obligation, I just didn't know it yet." "What obligation?" "The obligation we all have to help when we can. To show mercy when it's needed. To recognize that our lives can change in an instant if we're willing to take a chance." He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "That storm was the best thing that ever happened to me. Even though it was terrifying. Even though it led to complications and challenges and fights we never expected. All of it was worth it to end up here. With you. With our family. With our family, Amelia echoed, placing her other hand on her growing belly where their second child was beginning to show. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged, one by one, in the darkening sky. Daniel was asleep upstairs, safe and loved. The ranch was thriving. Their future stretched out before them, full of possibility and promise. "I need to tell you something," Amelia said quietly. "What's that?" "I've been writing in the journal you gave me, recording our story like you suggested. And I've realized something." "What?" "This isn't just a story about survival or scandal or fighting for what we built. It's a story about transformation, about two people who were both alone in different ways, who found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built something neither of them could have created alone." She turned to look at him. "It's a love story, Levi. Not the kind in books with declarations and grand gestures, but the real kind. The kind built through storms and struggles and choosing each other every single day." "The best kind," Levi agreed, "the kind that lasts." In August, Amelia delivered their second child, a daughter this time, born healthy and vigorous with Levi beside her and Dr. Morrison in attendance. They named her Rose, after Rosa, who'd been such a constant presence in their lives. Daniel, now 20 months old, was fascinated by his baby sister. He'd sit beside her cradle and babble to her, and Rosa swore the baby smiled in response. "Your family is growing," Rosa observed one afternoon, watching the children with soft eyes. "It is, and I couldn't be happier about it." "You deserve this happiness, mija. After everything you endured, you deserve peace and love and family." "We all deserve that," Amelia said. "We just don't all get it. I'm lucky." "Not lucky, blessed. There's a difference." That fall, Red Hollow held a harvest festival, and the Callahan family attended together. It was Amelia's first time back in the town square since that terrible day when she'd been surrounded and judged. But everything was different now. People smiled and waved. Children ran up to see baby Rose. Women asked Amelia medical questions in respectful tones. "This used to be the scariest place in the world for me," Amelia told Levi as they walked through the festival. "Now it's just a town, full of regular people living regular lives. You're not afraid anymore." "No, because I learned that their judgment couldn't actually destroy me. Only I could do that, by accepting their version of my story instead of living my own." As they walked past the courthouse steps where Levi had first claimed Daniel as his own, Amelia stopped. "This is where it all changed, where you stood beside me and refused to let them tear me down." "I couldn't let them hurt you. You were carrying my child. It was more than that, though, wasn't it? Even then, before we really knew what we were to each other, you cared." Levi pulled her close, careful not to jostle Rose sleeping in Amelia's arms. "I cared the moment I found you in that storm. I just didn't know how to admit it yet." That night, lying in bed with Rose in her cradle and Daniel in his own room down the hall, Amelia felt a profound sense of contentment. This life, this beautiful, complicated, hard-won life, was everything she'd never known to dream of. "Are you happy?" Levi asked in the darkness. "So happy it scares me sometimes. Like it's too good to be real, and I might wake up and find it was all a dream." "It's real. I promise you, it's real. Tell me we'll always have this, that nothing will take it away." "I can't promise that. Life is uncertain, but I can promise that whatever comes, we'll face it together. We'll fight for what we've built, just like we've been doing since the beginning." "Together," Amelia agreed. The years that followed brought more children. Another son, then another daughter. The ranch continued to prosper. Amelia's medical practice grew until she was working alongside Dr. Morrison as a genuine partner, respected throughout the territory for her skill and compassion. Daniel grew into a bright, curious boy who loved the ranch and the animals and asked endless questions about everything. Rose was gentle and thoughtful, with her father's gray-blue eyes and her mother's determination. Red Hollow changed too. New families moved in. Buildings were erected. The town grew from a dusty outpost into a real community. And at the center of it all, in both reputation and reality, was the Callahan family. People forgot, eventually, about the scandal that had brought Levi and Amelia together. Or if they remembered, it no longer mattered. What mattered was the family they'd become, the legacy they were building, the good they did in their community.
On their 5th anniversary, Levi and Amelia rode out to the old line shack where they'd sheltered during the storm. It was still there, weathered but standing, a monument to where their story began. "I should probably tear this down," Levi said. "It's not used for anything anymore." "Don't you dare! This place is important. It's just 4 walls and a roof. It's where you saved my life, where we really saw each other for the first time, where everything began." Amelia stepped inside, remembering. "We played cards right here. We talked for hours. We were just 2 strangers waiting out a storm, but somehow we became more." Levi followed her inside. "I fell in love with you here. I didn't realize it at the time, but I did. The way you refused to feel sorry for yourself. The way you asked questions and really listened to the answers. The way you laughed at my terrible jokes. Your jokes are still terrible, but you still laugh. Because I love you, terrible jokes and all." They stood in the small space where it had all begun, holding each other, grateful for the storm that had brought them together and the courage they'd found to build something lasting from it. A decade after that winter storm, Amelia stood on the porch of their ranch house watching the sunset. Daniel was 14 now, already showing signs of the man he'd become. His father's quiet strength, his mother's compassion. Rose was 12, and the younger children were playing in the yard under Rosa's watchful eye. Levi emerged from the barn and walked toward her, his stride still confident despite the touch of silver in his hair. He climbed the porch steps and pulled her into an embrace that felt as natural as breathing. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About everything. About how that frightened girl in a broken wagon became this woman. About how the solitary rancher became a devoted father and husband. About how a scandal became a love story. It was always a love story. We just didn't know it at first." "Do you have any regrets?" Levi considered the question seriously. "I regret that you had to endure judgment and shame. I regret that our beginning was so difficult, but I don't regret a single choice I made that led us here. Do you?" "Not one. Even the painful parts taught me something, made me stronger, made us stronger." She leaned into him, watching their children play in the golden evening light. "We did it, Levi. We built something real, something lasting, something worth every struggle we faced. We did, and we're not finished yet. We have years ahead of us, more challenges, more joys, more life to live together." "Together," Amelia agreed, and in that word was everything. All the love they'd found, all the battles they'd fought, all the future they'd build. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. From inside the house, they could hear Rosa calling the children for dinner. Life continued in its beautiful, ordinary way. And in that moment, standing on the porch of the ranch they'd built together, surrounded by the family they'd created, Levi and Amelia knew with absolute certainty that they'd found what so many people spend lifetimes searching for. They'd found home. They'd found love. They'd found each other. And that, in the end, was everything that mattered. The town that had once tried to destroy Amelia had become the place where her children would grow up loved and respected. The man who'd saved her life had become her partner in every sense of the word. And the child born from scandal had become the first of many. A legacy of love built on the foundation of 2 people who'd refused to let fear or judgment stop them from claiming the life they deserved. Sometimes strength isn't in fighting the rumor, as Amelia had learned that day in the town square. Sometimes it's in the courage to stand beside someone brave enough to defend what others are too afraid to claim. Sometimes it's in building a life so genuine, so filled with love and purpose, that the lies simply fall away in the face of truth. And from that day forward, whenever anyone in Red Hollow or the surrounding territory told the story of Levi and Amelia Callahan, they spoke not of scandal or shame, but of the ranch family who'd proven that love, real, hard-won, fought-for love, could overcome anything. The children grew. The ranch prospered. The years passed in their ordinary, extraordinary way. And through it all, Levi and Amelia walked together, hand in hand, proof that sometimes the most unlikely beginnings lead to the most beautiful endings. Their story became legend in the territory, not as a cautionary tale, but as inspiration. The woman who'd been judged and the man who'd defended her. The family they'd built against all odds. The love that had survived storms both literal and metaphorical. And somewhere in that expanded ranch house, filled with the sounds of children and laughter and life. The journal Levi had given Amelia sat on a shelf. Inside, in her careful handwriting, was the truth of their story. Not the gossip or the scandal, but the real story of two people who found each other in a blizzard and built a love that would last generations. A love that began with a broken wagon and a winter storm and grew into something that would outlast them both. A legacy written not just in words, but in the lives of their children and their children's children, all carrying forward the truth that sometimes the greatest love stories are the ones that start in the most unlikely places. And that truth, that beautiful, hard-won truth, was the gift Levi and Amelia gave to everyone who knew them. The proof that judgment and shame and fear don't have to win. That love, when it's real and fought for and defended, is stronger than any storm. Their story was complete, and it was perfect.